Stop. The kid grabbed the Mafia boss's sleeve in the rain and said the one thing you never say to a man like Rafael Torres. I'll take whatever happens, just hide my sister for one night. Rafael didn't pull the trigger. He opened the door, and that choice would erase a man from the city by morning. If this story pulled you in, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss what's coming next. I've got another unforgettable story dropping tomorrow, and while you're here, jump into the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our community from all around the world. Alright, let's get back into it. The last stop sits 3 blocks past where the streetlights stop working, wedged between a shuttered pawn shop and a parking lot that floods when it rains. Most people cross to the other side of the street when they walk past, the ones who don't know exactly what they're looking for. Inside, the air is thick with cigarette smoke, cheap whiskey, and the kind of silence that comes from men who've learned when not to speak. The bar itself is scarred oak, decades of carved initials and glass rings forming a map of bad decisions. 3 men occupy the back corner booth, territory claimed through presence, not words. Rafael Torres sits with his back to the wall, suit jacket draped over the booth, white shirt rolled to the elbows. He's a man built like consequence, broad shoulders, dark stubble tracing a sharp jawline, eyes that assess threats the way other people check the time. Gray threads his temples, earning him respect his younger self had to take by force. His hands rest steady around a glass of scotch he hasn't touched in 20 minutes. Beside him, Vincent leans back with the lazy confidence of someone who knows 3 exits and which one he'd use. Across the table, Luis watches the door with the kind of attention that never looks like attention at all. When the knock comes, if you can call it that, it's barely audible over the low murmur of conversation and the ancient jukebox playing something from the 70s, but Rafael hears it. He sets his glass down with deliberate care, eyes cutting toward the entrance. Vincent's hand drifts casually toward his waistband. Luis goes still. The knock comes again. Softer, almost apologetic. Rafael rises, buttoning his cuff as he crosses the floor. His shoes make no sound on the worn wood. He reaches the door and cracks it open 4 inches, body angled to block entry, one hand on the frame. Rain drips from the awning above, catching the sickly yellow glow of the streetlight. A boy stands there, 14, maybe 15, dark hair plastered to his forehead, wearing a black hoodie soaked through and torn at the shoulder. There's a bruise darkening along his cheekbone, dirt smeared across his jaw. But it's his eyes that stop Rafael, cold, hollow, watchful, carrying the weight of someone who's learned to anticipate pain before it arrives. Behind him, half hidden in shadow, a little girl grips his hand. 10 years old, blonde hair falling in wet tangles beneath a brown knit cap, wearing a comic book t-shirt under an olive jacket 2 sizes too small. She clutches a dog-eared comic to her chest with her free hand. The page is warped from water damage. Her face is pale, eyes wide and unblinking. Rafael's gaze moves between them, reading the story written in wet clothes, shallow breathing, and the way the boy's body angles to shield the girl from view. Bar's closed, Rafael says. His voice carries the flat authority of someone who doesn't explain twice. I'm not here for a drink. The boy's voice cracks slightly, but he doesn't look away. I need to ask you something. Vincent appears at Rafael's shoulder, arms crossed. Kid, you're about 3 bad decisions deep already. Turn around. The boy doesn't move. His jaw tightens, rainwater running down his face. I know who you are. Then you know you should leave, Rafael says. I will. The boy's hand tightens around his sister's. After you hear me out, Rafael considers slamming the door. It would be the smart move, the safe one. Instead, he finds himself asking, What do you want? The boy swallows hard. When he speaks, every word sounds like it costs him something. Can you hide my sister for one night? The question hangs in the rain-soaked air between them. That's it? Vincent's tone is sharp with suspicion. That's what you came here for? I'll leave, the boy continues, words spilling faster now. I'll go back. I'll take whatever happens. His voice breaks. I just need to know she's safe. One night, that's all I'm asking. Rafael studies the boy's face, the set of his shoulders, the tremor he's fighting to control, the way his free hand hovers near his sister's shoulder like a reflex he can't turn off. This isn't performance. This is survival math, done by someone too young to be making these calculations. Then he looks at the girl. She hasn't said a word. Her eyes are too wide, too still. When Vincent shifts his weight, she flinches, a full-body response she tries to hide by pressing closer to her brother. Rafael has seen fear before. He's caused it, wielded it, profited from it. But this is different. This is the kind of fear that doesn't come from one bad night. This is fear that's been taught, reinforced, made permanent. Who are you running from? Rafael asks quietly. The boy meets his eyes without hesitation. Someone worse than you. The words land like a challenge and a plea at once. Raphael feels Vincent tense beside him, but he raises one hand slightly, a gesture that means wait. Luis appears in the doorway behind Vincent. Older, gray-haired, wearing the kind of stillness that comes from decades of knowing when to watch and when to act. He looks at the girl first, takes in the comic book clutched like a lifeline, the way she's trying to make herself smaller, then at the boy, then at Raphael. Something passes across Luis's weathered face. Recognition, maybe. Or memory. Names, Luis says. It's not a question. The boy hesitates for half a second. Richard. He glances down at his sister. And this is Cindy. Luis nods once. That unreadable expression deepening. He looks at Raphael and says nothing at all. Raphael's hand remains on the door. Rain continues to fall, pooling in the broken asphalt behind the children. The jukebox inside plays on, oblivious. Someone laughs at the bar, the sound distant and wrong. Richard's breath comes shallow now, like he's been holding it too long. Cindy presses the comic tighter to her chest, pages crinkling under the pressure. And in that moment, that single breath between decision and consequence, Raphael sees himself reflected in the boy's desperate gamble. The same impossible mathematics. The same willingness to sacrifice everything for someone else's chance. He steps back, opens the door wider. Inside, he says. Richard blinks, disbelief flickering across his face. Both of us? For now. Raphael's tone leaves no room for negotiation. We talk. Then I decide. Richard nods once, quick and grateful. He guides Cindy forward, keeping himself between her and the men in the doorway. She moves like someone walking through a dream or a nightmare she's not sure has ended. As they cross the threshold into the dim warmth of the last stop, Raphael catches Luis's eye. The old man's expression says what his words don't. Be careful what you let in. Some doors don't close again. Raphael knows. He closes the door anyway. The warmth inside the last stop hits like a wall after the cold rain. Richard feels Cindy's hand tighten around his, her fingers ice cold despite the hours they've been running. He doesn't let go. Won't let go. Not until he knows she's somewhere he can't follow, somewhere safe. Raphael gestures toward a booth near the back, away from the handful of patrons nursing drinks in studied silence. The bar has gone quieter since they walked in. Eyes track their movement, not hostile exactly, but measuring, calculating. Richard guides Cindy into the booth first, sliding in beside her so he's closest to the aisle. Old habit. Always put yourself between her and whatever comes next. Raphael sits across from them. Movements unhurried. Economical. Up close, he's more intimidating than Richard expected. Not because of size, though he's broad-shouldered beneath the tailored shirt, but because of the stillness. The way he looks at you like he's reading a language you didn't know you were speaking. Vincent remains standing, arms crossed, positioned where he can see both the door and the booth. Luis disappears toward the bar without a word. Water, Raphael says to no one in particular. A moment later, Luis returns with 2 glasses and sets them on the table. Cindy stares at hers like she's forgotten what it's for. Richard pushes it closer to her. Drink, he says softly. She picks up the glass with both hands, movements careful, practiced, like someone who's been punished for spilling things. She takes small sips, eyes darting between Raphael and the exit. Raphael watches this exchange without comment. His face gives nothing away, but Richard can feel the assessment happening, the judgment forming. You know my name, Raphael says finally. That means you came here on purpose. Yes, Richard admits. Why? Because people are scared of you. Richard's voice is steadier now, the adrenaline settling into something harder. I figured if she was with you, no one would. He stops, recalibrates. I figured it would buy time. Time for what? Richard doesn't answer immediately. Cindy has set down her glass and gone back to clutching her comic book. The cover is torn, the pages swollen with moisture. He recognizes it, The Amazing Spider-Man, issue 248. She's read it so many times the spine is held together with tape. Time for her to be somewhere he can't get to, Richard says. He, Raphael repeats. Got a name? Richard's jaw works. Saying it out loud feels like giving it power. Evan Cole. Vincent straightens slightly at the name. Raphael's expression doesn't change, but something shifts in the air, recognition. Maybe, or context clicking into place. Cole, Raphael says slowly. The debt collector, among other things, Richard mutters. Luis returns with a blanket-worn fleece, the kind that's been washed 100 times, and drapes it over Cindy's shoulders without asking permission. She flinches at first, then slowly pulls it tighter around herself. Thank you, she whispers, the first words she's spoken since they arrived. Luis nods, something softening in his weathered face. He looks at Raphael. Kid's freezing. Raphael studies Cindy again, really looks at her this time. Takes in the way she sits with perfect posture despite exhaustion. The way she apologized with her whole body before saying thank you. The way her eyes track every movement in the room like she's cataloging exits. He's seen this before. Not in children, usually. In people who've learned that survival means anticipating violence before it arrives. How do you know Evan Cole? Raphael asks, his tone deliberately neutral. He took us in after our mom died, Richard says. Said it was temporary, just until we could figure things out. When was that? 6 months ago. Raphael's eyes narrow slightly. 6 months is a long time to wait before running. I tried before. Richard's voice drops. He found us. Said next time he'd make sure Cindy understood what happens when people don't follow rules. The words land heavy in the space between them. Vincent's expression hardens. Luis goes very still. Raphael leans back, fingers steepled in front of him. He's quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that makes Richard's pulse spike because he can't read what's happening behind those dark, calculating eyes. What happened tonight? Raphael asks finally. Richard's hand finds Cindy's under the table. She's trembling now, the warmth and safety making the fear catch up to her all at once. He said Cindy wouldn't cause problems anymore, Richard manages. That he'd take care of it himself. I didn't. His voice cracks. I couldn't let that happen. So you ran. So I ran. Raphael's gaze shifts to Cindy. Did he hurt you? She doesn't answer, just pulls the blanket tighter, making herself smaller. Cindy, Richard says gently. It's okay. You can tell him. She shakes her head. Not in denial, but in something closer to paralysis. Like the question itself is dangerous. It's all right, Luis says quietly from behind the bar. You don't have to say anything you don't want to say. Raphael stands abruptly. Richard tenses, ready to bolt, but Raphael just turns toward Vincent. Make a call, Raphael says. I want to know everywhere Evan Cole does business. Who he answers to. Who owes him. Who he owes. Everything. Vincent nods and pulls out his phone. Stepping away toward the front of the bar, Raphael looks back at Richard. You said one night. That's all I'm asking for. And then what? You go back to him? If that's what it takes to keep her safe, yes. The answer comes without hesitation, and Raphael sees it for what it is, not bravado, not martyrdom, but the cold arithmetic of someone who's already accepted the cost. You're 14 years old, Raphael says. 15 next month. Richard lifts his chin. Old enough to know what I'm doing. Old enough to make stupid decisions, you mean? Maybe. Richard's eyes don't waver. But it's my decision to make. Raphael studies him for another long moment. Then he pulls out his phone and types something quickly. The response comes back almost immediately. He reads it, expression unreadable, then pockets the phone. Cindy stays upstairs tonight, Raphael says. There's a room above the bar. Clean, warm, locked from the inside. Relief floods Richard's face. Thank you. You stay outside. The relief evaporates. What? You heard me. Raphael's tone leaves no room for argument. She goes upstairs. You stay in the alley. But, not negotiable. Raphael crosses his arms. You want her safe? This is how it works. On my terms. Richard's mouth opens, closes. He looks at Cindy, then back at Raphael, understanding dawning slowly. It's a test. Okay. Richard says quietly. Okay. Luis leads Cindy upstairs while Richard watches from the booth, every instinct screaming at him to follow. His hand hovers in the air where hers used to be, still warm from her grip. She looks back once before disappearing around the landing, eyes wide and uncertain, clutching that ruined comic book like it's the only thing tethering her to reality. She'll be fine, Raphael says, reading the panic written across Richard's face. Luis has 3 daughters. He knows what he's doing. Richard nods but doesn't believe it. Can't believe it. He won't believe anything until morning comes and she's still breathing. Raphael gestures toward the door. Outside, the rain hasn't let up. If anything, it's gotten worse. A steady downpour that turns the alley into a river of oil-slicked water and trash. Richard steps out into it, feeling the cold soak through his already wet hoodie within seconds. Behind him, the door clicks shut, not locked, but closed. He moves to the wall opposite the bar, pressing his back against corrugated metal that rattles in the wind. From here, he can see the entrance, the mouth of the alley, and the fire escape that leads to the second floor. The window up there glows with warm light. He imagines Cindy inside, dry, safe, maybe even sleeping. The thought steadies him. Richard slides down until he's sitting in a puddle, knees drawn up, arms wrapped around himself. Water runs down his face, mixing with something that might be tears but could just be rain, hard to tell anymore. Time moves strangely when you're cold and scared. Could be 20 minutes, could be an hour. Richard stopped shivering, which he knows from experience is a bad sign. Hypothermia doesn't announce itself with dramatics. It just takes you, quietly, the way everything dangerous does. A car slows at the end of the alley. Black sedan, windows tinted. Richard's heart kicks into overdrive. He presses harder against the wall, making himself smaller, invisible, willing the darkness to swallow him whole. The car idles for what feels like an eternity. Richard can't see inside, but he knows they're looking, searching. Evan always has people searching. He thinks about running, about leading them away from here, away from Cindy. But his legs won't cooperate, locked up from cold and exhaustion, and the terrible certainty that if he moves now, they'll see him. And if they see him, they'll know where to look for her, so he stays frozen, barely breathing. The sedan's engine revs once, then it rolls forward, disappearing around the corner. Richard releases a breath he didn't realize he was holding. His whole body starts shaking, delayed reaction. Adrenaline crash. Something. He bites down on his sleeve to muffle the sound. Inside the last stop, shapes move behind the frosted glass. He wonders if Raphael saw the car. Wonders if he understood what it meant. Another hour passes. Maybe 2. Richard's lost feeling in his fingers. His teeth have stopped chattering, which should worry him but doesn't. Everything feels distant now, wrapped in cotton and fog. The door opens. Raphael stands silhouetted against the warm interior light, rain falling between them like a curtain. He doesn't say anything, just looks at Richard sitting in the puddle, soaked through and shaking. "She's asleep," Raphael says finally. "Hasn't moved in an hour." Richard nods. "Can't quite form words anymore. You should come inside." "No." The word comes out slurred. "I stay out here. That was the deal." "The deal was I decide what happens next," Raphael corrects. "And I'm deciding you don't freeze to death in my alley. I'm fine." "You're hypothermic." "I said I'm fine." Richard tries to stand and his legs buckle. He catches himself against the wall, pride burning hotter than the cold ever could. "I stay until morning." That's what I told her. Raphael studies him for a long moment. Then he steps back inside and returns with a thermal blanket, the kind paramedics use, metallic silver on one side. He tosses it to Richard. It lands in the puddle between them. "Suit yourself," Raphael says. "But if you die out here, I'm not explaining it to your sister." He goes back inside. The door stays cracked open this time 4 inches. Enough to let warmth spill out, but not enough to be an invitation. Richard reaches for the blanket with numb fingers. It takes 3 tries to grip it properly. He wraps it around his shoulders, metallic side in, and feels the immediate difference. Not warm exactly, but less cold, less likely to die before dawn. He pulls his knees back up, tucking the blanket around himself, and settles in to wait. Through the cracked door, he can hear voices. Raphael's low rumble, Vincent's sharp replies. Someone laughs, Luis, probably. Normal sounds, safe sounds. The kind of sounds Cindy should grow up hearing instead of the careful silence that comes from trying not to trigger rage. Another car passes. Richard tenses, but it doesn't slow. Just normal traffic. Normal people going to normal places where children sleep in beds, and no one calculates the odds of surviving until morning. He thinks about his mom. Wonders what she'd say about this, about him sitting in an alley, trading his safety for Cindy's, trusting a man whose reputation is built on violence. Probably she'd be proud. Probably she'd tell him he did the right thing. Probably she'd hate that he had to do anything at all. The rain continues. Richard watches the window upstairs, the warm light that means Cindy's still there, still safe. He counts his breaths in for 4, out for 4 the way his mom taught him when panic attacks used to swallow him whole. Inside the last stop, Raphael stands at the window overlooking the alley. Vincent joins him, following his gaze to where Richard sits, wrapped in silver, soaked through and stubborn. "Kid's got spine," Vincent says. "Stupid, but spine." Raphael doesn't respond. He's watching the way Richard's eyes never leave that upstairs window, the way his body remains coiled despite exhaustion, ready to move if threat arrives. He's watching a 14-year-old boy choose the cold over safety because a promise to his sister means more than survival. Raphael has seen soldiers break faster, grown men with reputations fold under less pressure. But this kid, this stupid, brave, desperate kid, sits in the rain counting minutes until morning because he said he would. "Get me everything on Evan Cole," Raphael says quietly. "Everything." Vincent nods and pulls out his phone. Raphael stays at the window, watching, waiting, testing. Dawn breaks gray and cold, the kind of morning that never quite decides to be day. Richard hasn't slept. Can't sleep. Every sound in the alley jerked him back to alertness. Footsteps that turned out to be cats. engines that belonged to delivery trucks, shadows that were only shadows. But he's still here, still breathing, still waiting. The door opens wider this time. Luis stands there with a mug of something steaming and a towel draped over his arm. "Coffee," he says, extending the mug. "Black. Figured you could use it." Richard takes it with shaking hands, the heat almost painful against his frozen fingers. He brings it to his lips, bitter, strong, perfect. The warmth spreads through his chest like forgiveness. "Thank you," he manages. Luis nods toward the interior. "She's awake, asking for you." Richard's heart lurches. He sets down the coffee and starts to stand, legs protesting every movement. Luis catches his elbow when he stumbles, steadying him without comment. Inside, the bar looks different in morning light, smaller, more tired, the glamour of darkness stripped away to reveal worn wood and old stains. The jukebox sits silent. The bottles behind the bar catch weak sunlight through grimy windows. Raphael sits at a corner table, papers spread in front of him, phone pressed to his ear. He nods once at Richard's acknowledgement, not greeting, and continues his conversation in low Spanish. Luis guides Richard toward the stairs. "Bathroom's first door on the left. Get yourself dry. I'll bring her down." Richard wants to argue, wants to see Cindy immediately, but Luis's expression makes it clear this isn't negotiable. He climbs the stairs on unsteady legs, each step an exercise in willpower. The bathroom is small but clean. Richard catches sight of himself in the mirror and barely recognizes what looks back, face gray with exhaustion, bruise on his cheekbone now purple-black, eyes hollowed out and ancient. He looks like someone who's been running for years instead of hours. He peels off the wet hoodie, wrings it out in the sink, and uses the towel Luis gave him to dry his hair and face. It doesn't help much, but it's something. Control where you can find it. When he returns to the main floor, Cindy is sitting in the booth they occupied last night. She's wearing clothes that don't belong to her, sweatpants rolled up at the ankles, a flannel shirt that swallows her small frame. Her hair has been brushed, pulled back in a simple ponytail. The comic book sits on the table in front of her, pages spread open to dry. She looks up when Richard approaches, and her whole face transforms. "Richard." He slides into the booth across from her, and she immediately reaches for his hands. Her fingers are warm now, clean. He can smell soap and something else, lavender maybe. Someone gave her real shampoo. "Are you okay?" they ask simultaneously, and despite everything, Richard almost smiles. "I'm okay," Cindy says. "Luis's wife came. Her name is Rosa. She brought clothes and breakfast and she didn't..." Cindy stops, searching for words. "She didn't ask questions. Just let me eat." Richard squeezes her hands. "Good. That's good. Did you really stay outside all night?" "I said I would." Her eyes fill with tears. "You didn't have to do that." "Yeah," Richard says softly. "I did." Raphael finishes his phone call and approaches their booth. He sets a plate in front of Richard. Scrambled eggs, toast, bacon. The smell makes Richard's stomach clench with sudden, desperate hunger. "Eat," Raphael says. It's a command, not a suggestion. Richard picks up the fork with numb fingers and starts eating. He doesn't taste it, just needs the fuel. Needs to stay sharp for whatever comes next. Raphael slides into the booth beside Cindy, maintaining careful distance. She doesn't flinch this time, Richard notices. Last night she flinched at everything. "Cindy," Raphael says, his voice gentler than Richard's heard it. "I need to ask you some questions. You don't have to answer anything you don't want to. Understand?" She nods, small and uncertain. "The clothes Rosa brought you, those fit better than what you were wearing?" "Yes." Her voice is barely a whisper. "When's the last time someone bought you clothes that fit?" Cindy's brow furrows. "I don't. Before Mom died. Evan said we had to make do with what we had. Said we didn't need charity." Raphael's jaw tightens almost imperceptibly. "Did Evan have rules? Things you had to do?" "Lots of rules." The words come easier now, like she's relieved someone finally asked. "We couldn't leave without permission. Couldn't make noise after 8. Had to ask before eating anything. Had to clean everything twice because he said we were dirty, and dirty people don't deserve." She stops abruptly, realizing she said too much. "It's okay," Raphael says. "You're doing fine. Did Evan ever hurt you?" Cindy looks at Richard, panic flashing across her face. He nods slightly. "It's okay. You can tell him," and she turns back to Raphael. "He said discipline wasn't the same as hurting. That Mom let us get away with too much and that's why we were." She trails off, fingers picking at the edge of her comic book. "That's why you were what?" Raphael prompts gently. "Broken," Cindy whispers. "He said we were broken, and he was fixing us." The silence that follows is sharp enough to cut. Vincent, standing near the bar, goes very still. Luis sets down the glass he was cleaning with more force than necessary. Raphael's expression doesn't change, but something cold settles behind his eyes. The kind of cold that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with decision. "Richard," Raphael says, not looking away from Cindy. "What did Evan do when you tried to run before?" Richard sets down his fork, appetite gone. "Found us at the bus station, took us back, made Cindy." He swallows hard. "Made her stand in the corner for 8 hours. No sitting, no bathroom. Said next time he'd make it a full day. In the basement, in the dark." Cindy's whole body goes rigid at the memory. Her breathing quickens, shallow and fast. "Hey," Richard says quickly, reaching across the table. "Hey, you're here now. Not there, here." She nods, but can't seem to slow her breathing. Rosa appears from somewhere with a glass of water, setting it down gently. "Small sips, Mija. You're safe." Raphael watches this unfold the practiced way Richard talks Cindy down, the method to his comfort, the familiarity of crisis. He's done this before, many times. These aren't children learning to cope with trauma. These are children who've built their entire existence around surviving it. Raphael stands, pulling out his phone. He walks to the far corner and makes a call. Voice too low to hear but tone unmistakable. "Find him. Now." When he returns, his decision is already made. He just hasn't told them yet. "You're staying," Raphael says simply. "Both of you. Until this is handled." Richard's eyes widen. "We can't." "You're staying," Raphael repeats. And this time it's not an offer. It's protection. Richard wants to argue. Every instinct tells him that accepting help means owing something, and owing something means leverage, and leverage means control. That's how it worked with Evan. That's how it always works. But Cindy's hand is still trembling in his, and the exhaustion sitting in his bones tells him he can't run anymore. "Not today. Maybe not ever. Until this is handled," Richard repeats, testing the words. "What does that mean?" Raphael pulls out a chair, sitting so he's at eye level with Richard instead of towering over him. It's a deliberate choice, and Richard recognizes it for what it is, an attempt to make this feel less like a threat. "It means I need to understand what we're dealing with," Raphael says. "So I need you to tell me everything. Start from the beginning." Richard glances at Cindy. She's focused on her comic book now, fingers tracing the familiar panels like a prayer. He knows she's listening, though. Always listening. Always aware. "Our mom got sick last year," Richard begins, voice flat. Factual. Easier that way. Lung cancer. She worked 2 jobs and still couldn't afford treatment. By the time they found it, it was already stage 4. Raphael nods, not interrupting. She tried to keep working as long as she could, but near the end, she couldn't anymore. Bills piled up. Rent, medical, everything. Richard's jaw tightens. She borrowed money from people she shouldn't have. "Evan Cole," Raphael says. "Yeah." He seemed normal at first. Nice, even. Told her not to worry about payments until she was better. Brought groceries a couple times. Checked in. Richard's voice hardens. Mom thought he was a friend, but he wasn't. No. The word comes out bitter. He was collecting something else. Information. Access. He knew everything about us, where we lived, where Cindy went to school, my work schedule at the grocery store. Everything. Vincent moves closer, arms crossed, listening intently. Luis has stopped even pretending to work, attention fully on Richard. "When Mom died, Evan showed up at the hospital," Richard continues. "Said we couldn't stay in our apartment because Mom was 3 months behind on rent. Said he owned the building. Turns out that was true. He gave us 2 options. Foster care, split up, different homes, or stay with him temporarily, stay together, work off Mom's debt." "How much debt?" Raphael asks. 12,000, plus interest. Richard laughs, but there's no humor in it. "I'm 15. I make $9 an hour bagging groceries 15 hours a week. Do the math." Raphael's expression darkens. "Indentured servitude." He called it an arrangement. Said once we paid it off we could leave, get our own place, be a family again. Richard's hands curl into fists on the table. I knew it was bullshit, but Cindy was terrified of foster care, terrified of being separated, so I said yes. Cindy's fingers stop tracing the comic panels. She's staring at the table now, very still. "The rules started immediately," Richard says. "Little things at first. Curfew, chores. Ask permission before eating. Normal stuff, or at least stuff that sounded normal when he explained it. But then they got more specific. More controlling. Like what?" Raphael's voice remains even, but there's steel beneath it. Richard looks at Cindy, then back at Raphael. We had to account for every minute we weren't home. Had to show him our phones every night, texts, calls, everything. If we broke a rule, we got discipline. Time in the corner, extra chores, missed meals. He kept a ledger. Every mistake added to the debt. Every broken dish, every minute late, every time we talked back. Vincent swears under his breath. Raphael silences him with a look. After 2 months, the debt went from 12,000 to 18,000. Richard continues. I couldn't figure out how. He showed me the ledger once had everything itemized, said we were expensive to keep, said we should be grateful he didn't throw us out. Did you try to report him? Luis asks from behind the bar. To who? Richard's laugh is sharp. He made sure we understood that nobody would believe us. He's respected in the neighborhood, owns properties, sits on the church council, donates to the police benevolent fund. Who's going to believe 2 kids with a dead junkie mom his words over him? Raphael's phone buzzes. He glances at it, types something quickly, then returns his attention to Richard. What changed? What happened last night that made you run? Richard's face goes pale. He looks at Cindy, who's pulled the flannel shirt tighter around herself, making her small frame even smaller. Tell him, Cindy whispers. It's okay. Richard takes a shaky breath. Yesterday, Cindy spilled juice at breakfast. Accident. The glass slipped. But Evan... He stops, swallows hard. He lost it. Started screaming about waste and disrespect and how we never learn. Made her clean it up with her bare hands even though there was broken glass. Her fingers were bleeding. Cindy holds up her right hand. There are small cuts across her palm and fingers, some still raw. Raphael's expression doesn't change, but something lethal flashes in his eyes, the kind of look that promises consequences. After school, I came home early from work, Richard continues. Found Evan standing outside Cindy's door. Just standing there, in the dark. She was inside crying, and he was listening. When he saw me, he smiled. Said Cindy needed to learn about consequences, about what happens when little girls cause problems. What did he mean? Raphael asks quietly. I don't know. I didn't wait to find out. Richard's voice cracks. He told me to go to my room. Said he'd handle Cindy himself. That she wouldn't cause problems anymore after tonight. The way he said it. Richard shakes his head. I've seen that look before. In his eyes. When he talks about people who crossed him. People who aren't around anymore. The bar has gone completely silent. Even the ambient noise from the street seems muted. I waited until he went downstairs, Richard says. Grabbed Cindy. Went out the window. Down the fire escape. We ran. Didn't even grab coats, just ran. And came here. Raphael finishes. And came here. Richard meets his eyes. I didn't have a plan. Just knew Cindy needed to be somewhere he couldn't reach. Somewhere he'd be afraid to go. Everyone knows the last stop. Everyone knows you don't cross Rafael Torres. Raphael leans back, processing everything. His phone buzzes again, longer this time. Multiple messages. He reads them, expression unreadable. Evan Cole. Raphael says finally, almost to himself. Debt collector. Slumlord. Money launderer for the Volkov crew out of Brighton Beach. Minor player, but connected enough to be dangerous. Richard's stomach drops. Connected to who? Raphael looks at him directly. People who won't miss him. Raphael makes 3 phone calls in the next hour. All of them brief. All of them in the same tone, calm, measured, final. Richard watches from the booth, trying to read meaning in the pauses between words. The slight shifts in Raphael's expression that probably mean everything or nothing at all. Cindy has fallen asleep against his shoulder, the exhaustion finally catching up to her. She weighs almost nothing, her breathing soft and even. Richard doesn't move, doesn't risk waking her. This might be the first real sleep she's had in months. Vincent disappears around noon, returning with bags from a clothing store 3 blocks over. He sets them on the table without ceremony. For the kid, he says, nodding at Cindy. Rosa guessed sizes. If they don't fit, she'll exchange them. Richard stares at the bags. You didn't have to. Yeah, we did, Vincent interrupts. Can't have her walking around in Luis's daughter's hand-me-downs forever. There's something careful in the way he says it. Not charity, not pity, just matter-of-fact problem-solving. Richard doesn't know how to respond, so he just nods. Luis appears with sandwiches, real food, not leftovers or scraps. Turkey and cheese on fresh bread, chips, fruit. He sets plates in front of both Richard and Cindy, who wakes at the smell. Eat, Luis says simply. Both of you. They do. Cindy eats slowly, carefully, like she's still waiting for someone to tell her she's had enough. Richard forces himself to go slow too, even though his body is screaming for more. Old habits. Make the food last. You never know when the next meal comes. Raphael returns to the booth as they're finishing. He's changed clothes, different shirt, same calculated precision. His phone sits face down on the table in front of him. Evan Cole owns 4 buildings in the neighborhood, Raphael says without preamble. Collects debts for Dmitry Volkov's organization. Small-time work. Muscle for rent payments. That kind of thing. He's not important, but he's useful. Was useful, Vincent corrects from the bar. Raphael's expression doesn't change. Word went out this morning. Evan's protection is gone. The Volkovs were informed that he's been operating outside acceptable parameters, using his position to exploit vulnerable people. Children. Richard's breath catches. What does that mean? It means the people who tolerated him because he was useful now see him as a liability, Raphael explains. His buildings, the ones he claimed to own, are actually held by a shell company connected to Volkov. As of this morning, that shell company has new management. Evan no longer has access. His contacts? Vincent adds. The people who used to nod when he walked by? They don't see him anymore. Orders from the top. Luis wipes down the bar with methodical strokes. Man like Evan, he's got nothing without his network. No protection, no leverage, no reputation. Richard tries to process this. So you just, what? Made him disappear? Not disappear, Raphael corrects. Isolated. There's a difference. Cindy's looking between them, trying to understand. Is he gone? Is he coming back? Raphael turns his attention to her, his voice gentler. He can't touch you anymore. He can't touch either of you. That part's done. But where is he? Richard presses. Raphael's phone buzzes. He glances at it, reads something, then looks back at Richard. Right now? Discovering that his landlord wants him out by end of week, that his loan payments are all being called in early, that the protection he thought he had doesn't exist anymore. His bank account's frozen, Vincent says. Penalties for code violations on his properties, health department citations, fire marshal complaints. Amazing how many problems show up when people actually look. None of it traceable, Luis adds quietly. Just bad luck. Just the world finally catching up. Richard feels something loosen in his chest. Relief mixed with disbelief. You did all that in one morning? We made some calls, Raphael says. The rest handles itself. Fear has momentum once you set it in motion. There's a weight to those words that makes Richard understand this isn't the first time Raphael's done this. Maybe not even the 100th. This is how power actually works, not with guns or violence, though those exist in the background like punctuation, but with phone calls, with leverage, with the quiet dismantling of someone's entire world while they're still standing in it. What happens to him? Cindy asks, voice small. Raphael considers the question carefully. He'll leave, probably within the week. Men like Evan don't stay where they're not wanted. Too much pride. He'll go somewhere else, try to rebuild. Maybe he succeeds. Maybe he doesn't. That's it? Richard can't hide his disbelief. After everything he did, what do you want? Raphael's tone isn't challenging, just curious. You want him dead? Beaten? Locked up? Richard opens his mouth, closes it. He doesn't know what he wants. Part of him wants to see Evan suffer the way they suffered. But another part, the part that's been protecting Cindy for 6 months, just wants him gone. Erased. Like he never existed. I want him to never hurt anyone else, Richard says finally. Then this is better, Raphael says. Dead men become martyrs. Beaten men want revenge. But a man who loses everything and doesn't even know who took it? That's true consequence. That's walking around as a ghost, wondering which mistake finally caught up. Cindy leans against Richard again, processing this. So we're safe? You're safe, Raphael confirms. For how long? Richard's learned not to trust promises. Raphael meets his eyes. As long as you're here, you're under my protection. That's not temporary. That's permanent. Anyone who touches you answers to me. That's the message that went out this morning. Everyone who matters heard it. Vincent nods from the bar. The neighborhood knows. The Volkovs know. Even the cops who used to look the other way for Evan, they know too. Richard wants to ask what this costs, what Raphael expects in return. Because nothing's free. Everything has a price. That's the first lesson Evan taught them. But before he can speak, Luis sets down 2 keys on the table. Upstairs apartment, he says. 2 bedrooms. Furnished. Yours as long as you need it. Richard stares at the keys like they might explode. We can't pay. Nobody asked you to. Luis interrupts gently. This isn't a transaction. This is what we're doing. Cindy picks up one of the keys. turning it over in her small hands. Really? Really, Raphael says. And for the first time since their mother died, Richard lets himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they'll be okay. The apartment above the last stop smells like fresh paint and old wood. 2 bedrooms, a bathroom with a shower that actually has hot water, and a kitchen area with a refrigerator that hums steadily, proof that it works. The furniture is mismatched but clean. A couch that sags in the middle, a table with 4 chairs, beds with actual frames. Cindy stands in the doorway of the smaller bedroom, staring at the bed like she's forgotten what it's for. There are sheets, clean ones, still crisp from the package. A pillow, a blanket folded at the foot. "This is mine?" she asks, voice barely above a whisper. "This is yours," Richard confirms, throat tight. She walks in slowly, sets her comic book on the nightstand, then sits on the edge of the bed, tests it with her weight, lies back, stares at the ceiling. "Richard," she says. "Yeah?" It's soft. He has to turn away so she doesn't see his face. "Yeah, Cindy, it's soft." She falls asleep within minutes, still wearing Rosa's borrowed clothes, not even under the blanket, just exhaustion finally permitted to exist. Richard watches from the doorway for a long moment, memorizing this: his sister safe, sleeping without fear, in a bed that belongs to her. Then he closes her door softly and returns to the living room. Raphael is standing by the window, looking down at the street below. He hasn't left since they came upstairs an hour ago, hasn't explained why he's still here. Richard doesn't ask, doesn't want to break whatever fragile truce they've found. "She went down fast," Raphael observes without turning around. "She hasn't slept through the night in months," Richard says. "Even before last night. Evan's apartment, we could hear everything. Every footstep, every door. We learned to sleep light." Raphael nods, something in his posture shifting. "I had a sister once," he says quietly. The past tense lands heavy between them. Richard doesn't know what to say, so he says nothing, just waits. "Younger than me by 5 years," Raphael continues, still watching the street. "Anna. She had this laugh, the kind that made everyone else laugh too, even if they didn't get the joke." He pauses. "Our father drank. Our mother worked nights. I was supposed to watch her, keep her safe." Richard's chest tightens. He knows where this is going. "I was 16. Thought I knew everything. Thought I was tough enough, smart enough." Raphael's jaw works. "One night, I left her alone to meet friends. Told her I'd be back in an hour. Told her to lock the door." The silence stretches. Outside, a car alarm goes off, distant and insistent. "Our father came home drunk," Raphael says. "Started breaking things. Anna called me, but I was too far away. Too late." His hands curl into fists at his sides. "By the time I got back, the neighbors had called the police. Anna was in the hospital. Broken ribs, fractured skull." Richard's breath catches. "Did she?" "She lived," Raphael says. "Barely. Social services took her. Put her in foster care while our father went to prison. I thought," he stops, recalibrates. "I thought that meant she'd be safe, that the system would protect her. But it didn't," Richard says softly. "No." Raphael finally turns from the window. His eyes are dark, haunted by something that happened decades ago but never really left. "She ran away at 14. Got involved with the wrong people. Drugs. Bad men. I tried to find her. Spent years trying. By the time I did, it was too late to save her. Could only make sure the people who hurt her paid for it." The weight of that statement settles over the room like smoke. "I built everything I have now on one principle," Raphael says. "Power without protection is just violence. But protection without power is just hope. And hope doesn't keep people safe." Richard understands now why Raphael opened the door last night. Why he made those phone calls. Why keys to an apartment appeared without negotiation or price. This isn't charity. This is restitution for a debt that can never actually be paid. "When you showed up last night," Raphael continues, "asking me to hide your sister for one night." He shakes his head. "That wasn't a request for shelter. That was you handing me responsibility, trusting a stranger to do what you couldn't do alone." "I didn't have a choice," Richard says. "There's always a choice. You chose to trust me instead of running until you collapsed, instead of hoping it would work out." Raphael moves to the couch, sits heavily. "That kind of trust is dangerous. People like me, we don't get that often. Don't deserve it usually." "You could have closed the door," Richard points out. "Yeah." Raphael looks at him directly. "I could have, but you didn't." "No, I didn't." They sit with that for a moment, the choice made, the line crossed, the understanding that whatever this is now, it's not temporary. One night became one morning, became one afternoon, became something neither of them knows how to name yet. What happens now? Richard asks. Now, Raphael says, you and Cindy stay here. You eat, sleep. Stop looking over your shoulders every 5 seconds. Give your bodies time to remember what safe feels like. And then we figure out the rest. Raphael stands, straightening his shirt. School for Cindy. Work for you if you want it, real work. Not $9 an hour at a grocery store. Something that teaches you skills, gives you options. Richard's defenses go up immediately. I don't want charity. Good. I'm not offering it. Raphael's tone is matter of fact. I'm offering opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. You want to work? Work. You want to save money and get your own place eventually? Do that. I'm not keeping you here. I'm giving you time to figure out what comes next without someone breathing down your neck. Why? The question comes out harder than Richard intends. Why do any of this? You don't know us. We're nobody. Raphael moves toward the door, pauses with his hand on the knob. My sister was nobody too. Just another kid the system failed. Another statistic. He looks back at Richard. Maybe I can't save her, but I can do this. So I'm doing it. He opens the door. Raphael, Richard says. He turns. Thank you. The words feel inadequate, too small for what they're carrying. Raphael nods once. Lock the door behind me. Get some sleep. Luis will bring dinner around 6. Then he's gone, footsteps fading down the stairs. Richard stands alone in the apartment, his apartment, at least for now, and lets himself feel it. The safety, the exhaustion, the bone-deep relief of not having to run anymore. He walks to Cindy's door, opens it just enough to see her still sleeping, face slack and peaceful. One night, he'd asked for. One night to know she was safe. But standing here now, watching his sister breathe easy for the first time in 6 months, Richard understands what Raphael understood from the beginning. One night was never going to be enough. The days develop a rhythm that feels foreign to Richard, too easy, too normal, like wearing someone else's clothes that happen to fit. Wake up, check on Cindy, breakfast that nobody monitors or rations, conversations that don't end in consequences. It's been 4 days since they arrived at the last stop. 4 days of waiting for the other shoe to drop, for Raphael to present the bill, for the real conditions to reveal themselves. But nothing comes. Just Luis bringing groceries, Rosa checking in with Cindy, Vincent nodding at Richard when they pass in the hallway. No ledger, no rules, no debt accumulating in the silence. It makes Richard's skin crawl with anticipation. On the 5th morning, Raphael appears at their door just after breakfast. Richard tenses immediately. Here it comes. The real ask, the actual cost. But Raphael just gestures toward the stairs. Walk with me, he says. They end up on the street outside the last stop. Early sun cutting through the buildings. Traffic already building toward midday chaos. Raphael walks slowly, hands in his pockets, not saying anything for a full block. Finally, you're waiting for the trap. Richard doesn't deny it. Everything costs something. You're right. Raphael agrees. Everything does. Question is what you think you owe me. I don't know yet. That's what scares me. Raphael stops at the corner, turns to face him directly. I'm going to tell you what I want, and you're going to think I'm lying. But I'm going to say it anyway. He pauses. I want you and Cindy to stay until you're ready to leave. Not until I'm done with you. Not until some debt is paid. Until you decide you're ready to go. Richard studies his face, looking for the catch. That's it? That's it. And if we want to leave tomorrow, then you leave tomorrow. Raphael's expression doesn't change. I'll make sure you have money for first month's rent somewhere safe. References if you need them. But Richard, his voice hardens slightly. If you leave because you're scared of staying, because you think trust is more dangerous than running, you're making a mistake. How do you know? Because I've seen what happens to kids who keep running. They run until they can't run anymore, and then they end up exactly where they were trying to avoid, or worse. Raphael starts walking again. You want to leave because you've found something better? Because Cindy's stable, and you've got a plan? That's different. That's smart. But leaving because you're afraid of accepting help? That's just another kind of prison. The words hit harder than Richard expects. He thinks about the last 6 months, the constant calculation, the survival math, the way fear became the only reliable constant. What if I don't know how to stay? Richard admits quietly. Raphael nods like he expected this. Then you learn. One day at a time. One decision that isn't about immediate survival. One morning you wake up and realize you're not running anymore. They walk another block in silence. Richard notices things he didn't before. The way people nod at Raphael with respect, not fear. The way shop owners wave from doorways. This isn't the neighborhood boss everyone's terrified of. This is something more complicated, more human. Cindy needs to go back to school, Raphael says. She's missed almost 2 months. The longer she's out, the harder it gets. Richard's stomach knots. What if someone asks questions? What if Evan's gone? Raphael's tone is final. Left the city 3 days ago. Heading west. Last anyone heard. And even if he comes back, he's not going near either of you. That's not a promise. That's a fact. How can you be sure? Because I made it clear what happens if he does. Raphael stops at a crosswalk, waits for the light. And because men like Evan are cowards, they hurt people who can't fight back. The moment there's real consequence, they fold. He's gone, Richard. For good. The light changes. They cross. School means paperwork, Richard says. Guardianship papers. Proof of address. We don't have. I have a lawyer, Raphael interrupts. Good one. She's handled situations like this before. Temporary guardianship can be arranged. You're 15, old enough that with the right documentation, you can make decisions for Cindy until you're 18. After that, you file for permanent custody. Richard stops walking. You already looked into this. Of course I did. Why? Raphael turns to face him. Because I'm not asking you to figure this out alone. That's the whole point. He pulls out his phone, shows Richard a contact. Her name is Diana Reeves. She's expecting your call. Set up a meeting, talk to her, see what she says, then decide. Richard stares at the phone number. And if I say no? If I say this is too much? Then you say no, Raphael says simply. But Richard... He waits until Richard meets his eyes. Saying yes doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean you owe me your life. It means you're smart enough to accept help when it's offered without strings. Everything has strings. Not this. Raphael pockets his phone. I'm not your father. I'm not your guardian. I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to give you the thing nobody gave me when I was your age: options. Real ones. Not just survival, but the possibility of something better. Richard's throat tightens. He doesn't know how to process this. Doesn't have a framework for kindness that doesn't demand payment. What about Cindy? He asks finally. What if she wants to stay? What if she gets comfortable and then she gets comfortable? Raphael says. That's allowed. Children are supposed to feel safe. That's not a weakness. That's not something to fear. That's the whole point. They start walking back toward the last stop. Richard's mind is racing, trying to find the angle, the hidden cost. The moment this becomes another version of Evan's ledger, but he can't find it. And that terrifies him more than anything. I need to think about it, Richard says. Take your time. Raphael opens the door to the bar. Talk to Cindy. See what she wants. Then decide together. Whatever you choose, I'll support it. Richard climbs the stairs to their apartment, head spinning with possibilities he's been too afraid to imagine. Inside, Cindy is drawing at the kitchen table, actually drawing, not just staring at her comic book using markers Rosa brought yesterday. She looks up when he enters. Where did you go? Talking with Raphael. Richard sits across from her, watches her add color to what looks like a superhero. He wants to help us stay, get you back in school. Make things official. Cindy's hand stills. What do you want? It's the first time anyone's asked him that in 6 months. Maybe longer. I don't know, Richard admits. What do you want? She looks around their apartment, the soft bed, the full refrigerator, the markers spread across the table. I want to stop being scared all the time. Yeah, Richard says softly. Me too. Can we stay? Her eyes are hopeful and terrified at once. Is that allowed? Richard thinks about Raphael's words, about choices that aren't just survival, about the possibility of something better. Yeah, he says finally. I think maybe it is. The lawyer's office smells like leather and old paper. Diana Reeves is younger than Richard expected, maybe 40, sharp-eyed, wearing a blazer that probably costs more than he made in 3 months at the grocery store. She doesn't talk down to him, doesn't treat him like a charity case or a problem to solve. She treats him like a person making important decisions. Temporary guardianship is straightforward in situations like yours, she explains, sliding papers across her desk. You're 15, almost 16. Cindy is your biological sister. With proper documentation and character references, we can establish you as her legal guardian until you reach 18. After that, we file for permanent custody. References, Richard repeats. From who? Raphael has offered to provide one. Luis and Rosa as well. I'll also need documentation from Cindy's school once she's enrolled showing stable attendance and environment. Diana leans back in her chair. The court wants to see that Cindy is in a safe, consistent situation with someone capable of caring for her. You've been doing that for 6 months already. We just need to make it official. Cindy sits beside Richard, quiet, but present. She insisted on coming to this meeting, wanted to be part of the decision. What if they say no? Cindy asks. What if they take me away? Diana's expression softens. That's not going to happen. You're not in danger. Your brother has proven he can care for you. The system doesn't separate siblings unnecessarily, especially when one is old enough and willing to take responsibility. She pauses. I've handled dozens of cases like this. I know what I'm doing. Richard wants to believe her, wants to trust that bureaucracy can work in their favor for once instead of grinding them down. How long does it take? He asks. 4 to 6 weeks for temporary guardianship. Permanent custody hearing would be scheduled within 6 months after you turn 18. Diana slides another document forward. In the meantime, I'm filing for emergency educational placement for Cindy. She'll be enrolled at PS 118, good school, 2 blocks from where you're staying. Fresh start, fresh start. The words feel impossible and necessary at once. They sign papers, answer questions, provide information that feels too personal but necessary. Diana handles everything with efficient kindness, never rushing, always explaining. When they leave an hour later, Richard feels lighter and heavier at once. Lighter because something is actually happening, official, legal, real. Heavier because it means committing to staying, to trusting that this won't fall apart. That wasn't so bad, Cindy says as they walk back toward the last stop. No, Richard agrees. It wasn't. Richard? She tugs his sleeve. Are we really going to be okay? He looks down at her, 10 years old, blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail Rosa taught her to make, wearing clothes that actually fit, face cleaner and fuller than it's been in months. She looks like a kid again instead of a survivor. Yeah, Cindy, he says. I think maybe we are. That evening, Luis cooks dinner upstairs in their apartment, says Rosa's teaching him some new recipe, and he needs guinea pigs. The kitchen fills with the smell of garlic and tomatoes and something baking. Vincent shows up with bread. Raphael appears with wine for the adults and juice for Cindy. It feels accidental, this gathering, but Richard suspects it's anything but. This is intentional inclusion, deliberate family. They eat at the small table, plates crowded together, conversation flowing easily. Luis tells a story about his daughters when they were young. Vincent complains about a supplier. Raphael listens more than he talks, but when he does speak, people pay attention. Cindy eats slowly, savoring everything, occasionally looking around like she's checking if this is real. Halfway through dinner, Vincent says something Richard doesn't even catch what, and Cindy laughs. Not a polite chuckle, not a nervous giggle. A real laugh, bright and sudden and completely unself-conscious. The entire table goes still. Cindy notices the silence and stops mid-laugh, face flushing. Sorry, Don't apologize, Rosa says quickly, appearing from the kitchen. That's a beautiful sound. Cindy looks uncertain, but Luis grins. See? Told you my cooking was that good. The tension breaks. Conversation resumes. But Richard catches Raphael's expression across the table, something raw and unguarded, there and gone in a moment. This is what Raphael lost. What he couldn't save. What he's been trying to make right ever since. After dinner, Vincent and Luis clean up despite Richard's protests. Rosa takes Cindy into the living room, showing her something on her phone, pictures of her daughters, maybe, or recipes. Richard can't tell. Raphael steps onto the small balcony overlooking the street. Richard follows after a moment, uncertain but compelled. They stand side by side in the evening air, watching traffic pass below, the city settling into its nighttime rhythm. Thank you, Richard says. It's inadequate, but it's all he has. You already said that, Raphael replies. I mean it more now. Raphael nods slowly. When Cindy laughed tonight, he stops, recalibrates. That's what matters. Not the paperwork, not the apartment, not any of it. That moment when she remembered how she hasn't laughed like that since before Mom died, Richard says quietly. I know. Raphael's voice is rough. That's what I'm trying to give you both. Not just safety, not just survival, but the space to remember how to be people again, how to laugh, how to trust, how to live. Richard's throat tightens. I don't know how to repay. There's no debt, Raphael interrupts firmly. How many times do I have to say that before you believe it? Maybe a few more, Richard admits. Raphael almost smiles. Fair enough. They stand in comfortable silence, watching the city breathe. Inside, Cindy's laughter rings out again, softer this time, but just as real. She's going to be okay, Raphael says. You both are. Richard lets himself believe it. Just for tonight. Just for this moment. Yeah, he says. Maybe we will. Cindy starts school on a Monday morning with a backpack Rosa picked out and supplies Luis bought. She's nervous. Richard can see it in the way she grips his hand too tight, but she walks through the doors anyway. Richard watches until she disappears inside, then turns to find Raphael waiting by the car. "She'll be fine," Raphael says. "I know." Richard doesn't move. Doesn't make it easier. No, it doesn't. They drive back to the last stop in silence. Richard has started working there, officially helping Luis with inventory, learning basic bookkeeping, understanding how a business actually runs. It's not glamorous, but it's honest, and it's teaching him skills that matter. The apartment above the bar has become home in ways Richard didn't expect. The couch sags in familiar places now. Cindy's drawings cover the refrigerator. Their routine has worn grooves into the day's breakfast at 7, Cindy to school, Richard to work, dinner together, homework at the kitchen table, sleep that comes easier each night. 2 months pass this way, then 3. The temporary guardianship comes through without complications. Cindy thrives at school, makes friends, joins an art club, starts smiling reflexively instead of carefully. Richard saves money, learns, stops flinching at unexpected sounds. They don't see Evan Cole again, don't hear his name. It's like he was erased from existence, and maybe in the ways that matter, he was. Raphael remains constant but distant, present without hovering, protective without controlling. He checks in, offers guidance when asked, provides opportunities but never demands. It's the kind of relationship Richard never knew was possible with someone who holds power. One evening in late spring, Richard finds Raphael in the bar after closing. He's alone, going through receipts, reading glasses perched on his nose, making him look older and somehow more human. "Got a minute?" Richard asks. Raphael looks up, gestures to the seat across from him. "What's on your mind?" Richard sits, nervous despite months of safety. "Cindy and I have been talking about the future, about what happens when I turn 18, and I think," Richard takes a breath, "I think we want to stay. Not forever necessarily, but longer, until we're actually ready, until Cindy's older and I've saved enough to give us real stability." Raphael removes his glasses, sets them aside. "You're sure? You're not staying because you think you owe me?" "I'm staying because this is the first place that's felt like home since Mom died," Richard says honestly. "Because Cindy's happy. Because I'm learning things I couldn't learn anywhere else. Because you gave us a chance when nobody else would." He pauses. "That's not debt. That's gratitude." Raphael nods slowly. "Then you stay. Long as you need. Thank you." "Stop thanking me." But there's no heat in it. Just acceptance. Richard stands to leave, then hesitates. "Raphael, that first night when I asked you to hide Cindy, did you know? Did you know you'd say yes?" Raphael considers the question carefully. "No. I almost said no. Almost closed the door. But then I looked at you, really looked, and I saw someone willing to sacrifice everything for someone else's chance. That kind of love is rare. It deserved more than a closed door." "I wasn't brave," Richard says. "I was terrified. Bravery is being terrified and doing it anyway." Raphael replies, "You stood in the rain all night because you promised your sister you would. That's not weakness. That's the strongest thing I've ever seen." The words settle between them, acknowledgement, respect, understanding. Richard returns upstairs to find Cindy already in pajamas, comic book open on her lap. She looks up when he enters. "Everything okay?" she asks. "Yeah." Richard sits beside her. "Everything's good." She leans against him, comfortable and trusting. "I like it here." "Me too." "Do you think Mom would be proud of us?" Richard's throat tightens. "Yeah, Cindy, I think she'd be proud." They sit together in the soft lamplight, the sounds of the city filtering through open windows. Somewhere below, Luis locks up the bar. Down the street, traffic moves in familiar patterns. Above them, the apartment that became home holds their new beginning. One night changed everything. One desperate gamble became a foundation. One moment of trust transformed into a future neither of them dared imagine. Raphael stands at the window downstairs, looking up at the apartment where light glows warm. He thinks about Anna, about failure and redemption and the impossibility of fixing the past, about the weight of responsibility and the strange grace of second chances. He couldn't save his sister, but he saved these children, and maybe, just maybe, that's enough. Sometimes protection comes from unexpected places. Sometimes one night becomes forever. And sometimes the most dangerous men are the ones who understand what it really costs to keep someone safe. Richard and Cindy sleep soundly that night. Wrapped in safety they've finally learned to trust. Above the last stop, in a neighborhood that knows how to protect its own, 2 children remember what it feels like to simply be children again. And that all of that started with a boy standing in the rain, asking a stranger for one night. Just one night. It was always going to be more. Thanks for staying with this story right till the final moment. You're the reason these stories come alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to see your thoughts and connect with you down there.